This is part 2 of pouring up your impression that you've just taken. The first thing you want to do after you've taken an impression on someone is to generously disinfect it. If you're not able to pour it up right away, wrap it in a paper towel, saturate it completely, and place it in the patient's work pan. Let that sit for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you're going to take it out of the paper towel. And if you rinse it off and start pouring it up, then you're going to have water sitting in the bottom of the impression tray on the incisal edges and the occlusal surface. So you need to get that water out, because if you go to pour it up, the plaster will sit on top of the water instead of penetrating down into every single nook and cranny piece of anatomy that you need to capture. So we're going to take our lab hose, and it blows air, and it's almost like looking at a picture that's glossy and you want it to look matte. So we're looking at that. It's nice and matte, no water in there, and it's ready to pour up. So we're going to move the work pan out of the way. We have our dental vibrator here, and you want to make sure you we use headrest covers to protect it, because if not, you can see how plaster gets directly on it and it's really hard to clean off. So if you put this plastic headrest cover over it, this will last you forever. So we're going to grab our lab bowl, add a little bit of plaster. For one impression, I usually fill it up halfway. And I'm going to grab my lab spatula. And this is just eyeballing for your pour up. This is not an exact measurement. So I'm going to run the water light. If you run it too fast and you put this under it, the plaster will splash up at you. So we're just going to use a light pressure, and your goal is to make it look like sour cream. So I'm just going to start mixing it, and obviously, just like pancakes, it needs more water. So I'm going to mix it until it looks like sour cream, making sure I incorporate all of the plaster into the mix. And then once I do that, I'm going to put it on the vibrator, and I'm going to vibrate all of the air bubbles out of it. Now, if you're baking, you slam the pan down on the countertop to get the air bubbles out. And you can see how many air bubbles come out of that. So we're going to wipe this across and just kind of pop the air bubbles. And once it's nice and smooth and there's just a few left, you're ready to start your pour. Now, I place the lower right quadrant right here, and I can feel this vibrating, and you can see that this part's vibrating. And the whole purpose of that is If you put the plaster in this quadrant right here, the vibration moves the plaster. And you see how slow I'm pouring up. And you always want to add where you started. You don't want to jump around to different areas because you're going to trap air. If you have teeth that are in torso version and they have really tight contacts, you can kind of make sure you push it down in that area. Keep adding and let it flow in the same direction, just like water through a valley. And if it's going too fast, pull it back, just like a gas pedal. Making sure it flows into every part of that anatomy. Okay. And once you have the teeth covered, the hard part's done. You can add and just shake it a little bit so it flows better. And just kind of let it go around. Don't plop it on there because you're going to trap air. Now, if I left it like this, it would be very hard to try to get this out. So with the vibrator turned off, I will take a little bit of plaster and put it in my hand. In your body, your skin is the largest organ that you have. And what my hand is doing right now is absorbing the excess water from the plaster. So I'm just gonna mix it around because I want a really good base on this to be able to have a good handle, and it also trims better if you're making appliances. So this impression would be for an appliance. If we were making a study cast for an orthodontist, some like to use a base to pour up. Others will do this and trim it up, mount it, and then use finishing stone to go ahead and make it look really nice and attractive for the patients. So we have our plaster. We're going to go along here and add it. And because we've taken the water out, it's not going to slump. We're going to add a little bit more. Just letting my hand do the work there, taking the excess water out. Do one more layer. Okay, now if you want it to come over this direction, you're going to wiggle your spatula and you can actually move the plaster where you want it. While that's doing the initial set, we're going to clean out the excess. And you want to rinse your bowl out while the plaster's still wet. Don't let it set up in the bowl because it's much easier to clean it while it's wet. And then once you see that your bowl's completely clean, turn it upside down and let it dry out. And then once you have the initial set on it, you can wet your hands and kind of sculpt it a little bit. You want to make sure that you keep it from slumping down over, because then it's going to lock the plaster mold into the impression. So you want to just kind of go around and make sure it's not locked in. Now yesterday we took an impression, and I purposely did not wrap it in a paper towel and saturate it with water. This is 24 hours after taking an impression. The water starts to evaporate, and this is called shrinkage with the alginate. So you can see that this would not be okay to make an appliance on, because this is not the accurate shape of the patient's mouth. So that's just very brittle now, and it's going to get very hard and not pliable like a fresh impression. So you either need to pour this up within 20 minutes, or if you have to wait until lunchtime because you're short-staffed, or one assistant has to go help out in the front, then just wrap them up in a paper towel, wet them really good, and make sure that you dry them out and pour them up by lunchtime. Or if you take it in the afternoon, then you pour it up before you leave.